Okay, we're going to keep marching along here with our AWS Lightsail server. We created it in the previous video, and it should be up and running still. Let's check that. Go to our Lightsail page. If we're lost, we need to get back. We may have to start over from the Amazon AWS console page, and we'll do that just to make sure everybody's with us. Go to aws.com, amazon.com/AWS is what I typed in, and then we'll go to AWS Management Console. And this is the kind of the ugly looking console, but we can get the pretty looking Lightsail console. Remember, that's created because we wanted a friendly experience. And we see that I've got two virtual machines running here. This is the RVU LAMP PHP 7-1 machine I created before. And you'll recall that it has its own IP address there in Oregon. And it has a way to access it either through the web SSH connection there, which you can click on and go ahead, see that, right? Or if you want to do it the hard way, like I do, you can use the original Mac terminal. You check your present working directory. I happen to be in the downloads folder. If you need to change to the downloads folder, you would do that like we did in the previous example. Usually when you go to the terminal, it starts you in your home directory, just your name, whatever that happens to be, and you have to change to your downloads directory. So we did that already. Your downloads directory has your PEM file. Remember, that was a super important key file. And then you connect to the server using that SSH command where you call your PEM file and then your IP address, right? That should be pretty familiar. So now, where we left off in the last video, we started up a server, and we even got to the point where we connected to the server, but we didn't really do anything with the server. It was just up and running, and we were happy to stop at that point. So now we're going to spend a few minutes and just navigate around this server and talk about what's happening here. So this is a Linux server. It's based on a distribution of Linux called Debian, which is popular, and Bitnami has settled on that because it likes it for whatever reason. So you can see here that when you connect, they give you a link to the documentation for the server. And we're happy to recall that if we get lost here. And there's very, very good documentation from Bitnami, which is why it's good to start with something like that rather than go off the reservation and have to build everything from scratch. So we're at a command prompt. That's a lot like our command prompt for our Mac or our Windows machine. And if you do a quick ls here, you can see what's here. So there's two files, bitnami underscore application password and bitnami underscore credentials. So when the bitnami image is created by the script, it generates a password randomly, and it uses that in certain cases. So they give you the option to see that. So I like to use this command nano, and it will act like kind of a text-based word processor, and you can use that to see what's actually in the file. So you'll need to do this from time to time here. You can see the default password is, this thing in quotes, VAW, blah, blah, blah. So you may need to refer to that later. So we'll save that, right? The other way you can do that if you want to be slick is you can, rather than use nano, you can use cat, C-A-T, space, and then the file name, and it'll tell you the same thing. You can't edit it or anything, but it just displays it for you. All right, well, what we have here is we have a web application server. And the web application server is really what you might think of as the nuts and bolts of what everybody does with the web. So on this page here, I told you how this LAMP technology stack runs WordPress, which is 35% of all websites on the internet. So almost everybody who has a blog is running on WordPress, and almost everybody who's running on WordPress is running on LAMP. So it's a good thing to know because it's kind of a standard that's evolved over 10, 15 years, and everybody uses it to some degree or another. So as wannabe digital health cloud nerds, we should know a little bit about that, and that's why I'm bringing it to your attention here. We talked about how LAMP has Linux, Apache as the web server. Your code is written in PHP, and then all the data is saved in a MySQL database. So LAMP has the four letters, the operating system, the web server, the application code, and the database. And that brings us to what you might think of as central organizing principles for how data is being served on the web today. Generally, they call it a three-tier application server. There's the presentation layer, the application layer, and the data layer, or tier. You can probably use those terms interchangeably. So almost any product that you make on the internet these days is going to fall into that design pattern. Now, there is another evolving pattern that we can talk about, but I'm going to save that for later in the course because this is still what we're working on after many years of evolution. The other thing is very hot right now, and I guess we'll see if it sticks. It probably will. But this three-tier application, application server approach is really the industry standard, I think it's safe to say. So let's just look at a couple examples of a three-tier application, and I'll talk you through how you can think of a web page or a website that you go to in terms of these three tiers. So I have, in this tab, I have my web-based email from Zoho, right? Zoho is kind of like a cheap version of Office 365 or Google G Suite. They're all very similar. This could be Gmail, this could be Outlook.com. Doesn't matter too much. So someone over the years dreamed up this user interface for webmail. You have your things on your left, your folders and so on, and then you have your messages in your inbox. Then you click on a message, and then it brings up a new window, and you can use little buttons to reply or forward or whatever you have to do, right? Everybody's seen this a million times, and so I'm not describing anything unfamiliar. So what does it mean in the sense of the three-tier application server? Well, what you see on the web browser screen, you can think of the screen being sliced up into, your left area, your middle area, your right area, however it happens to be. You can think of like a piece of graph paper and someone's sliced and diced it in a way that they think makes it easy to use and look friendly and all that kind of thing. So most of the things on a web page these days are clickable. That was the invention of hypertext. And click here, go somewhere else, click here, something else opens, etc. So for example, you click on the Welcome to Amazon Web Services, and then new data is loaded, right? So what started off as being presentation of information, you initiated some action through your interactive process, and the screen had to change and data had to get loaded from somewhere. So the question is, well, okay, if I click on this Welcome to Amazon Web Services, where does it come from? So in the sky there's a database that has all the email messages that you are allowed to view. Now, your email messages are different from somebody else's account, and so on and so forth. So there's logic in there that filters what you see. So you might think of anything that filters data or goes and retrieves data as being at the application tier, right? So there's custom data. You have to figure out what's right for each moment, what's right for each type of event. Your application code is safely under that category. The third tier, the data tier, that's the database server. Maybe it's something like Oracle. We talked about Oracle and how expensive and secure and reliable and fantastic a database server that was and how that's been replaced with other products over the years. Maybe it's holding all these billions of messages. Who knows what's actually on the database tier for Zoho. In our server, MySQL is on the database tier. So we're going to use code written in PHP as our application tier. We're going to use data stored in MySQL, and then when the application tier wants to present something to us, it's going to be delivered to us through the Apache web server, and that's going to come up on our web browser, and that kind of completes the three-tier circuit. So to review, our operating system is the L. Not too interested in that right now. Our application is a web application, right? So that's all the boxes, so to speak. Now our presentation is provided by HTML and Apache. That's the A and the LAMP. The MySQL is the data, and the P is the PHP, and that's our application layer. All right. So that's kind of the webmail scenario. So the other thing you might be familiar with is LinkedIn, right? So here's this nice user interface that lets me organize all my education and all my friends on connections and so on. So each time I go in here, let's suppose I want to edit something, right? So I click the edit button. It gives me this nice form. So I would use my boxes. This is my presentation layer. I change my name from GM to George or to Matt, whatever I'm in the mood for that day. I change my title, whatever I want to, maybe I'm looking for a new job and I want to tweak my title. So then I click the Save button, and then I kick off my application logic, and the application logic says, okay, he doesn't want to be known as this name anymore, and he wants to change this certification, so then the LinkedIn application will write some new data to the database. So almost any web application that you're familiar with would fall into this three-tier application server model. All right, so if we have questions about that, let's address those during class time. But now what we want to do is we want to go and kind of mess around with our server to the point that we get a sense of what's happening behind the scenes with a web server. So I'm going to go back to my Mac terminal here, my nice green screen. And I've connected to my Bitnami server here. You can see that here. My command prompt is showing that rather than my Mac command prompt. Just to review that, if I do exit, I can close my connection and I can reconnect here. So you can see that it changes depending on whether I'm in Mac terminal mode or have connected over via SSH. So now I'm at my Bitnami command prompt. I do my ls, and I see that there's two links here in blue. One is htdocs, and one is called stack. So stack is a listing of all the programs that are running on the server. I'm going to take a quick peek in there. We can go there and see. That's going to have things like PHP, MySQL, various scripts, all that kind of stuff. There's our Apache 2 folder. So everything that Bitnami loaded on the server is under the stack folder. We're not going to mess with that right now. Instead, we're going to do cd.doc to go up one level. We're back where we started, and we're going to look in this htdocs folder. So that stands for hypertext docs. So way back when Apache decided it was going to configure all of its servers using that convention, it's stuck over the years. So we can go into htdocs, cd htdocs, all right? Now I can see what's in there, and there's basically nothing in there. There's one file, index.html. So just to see what's in there, I'm going to go to my Lightsail. I'm going to cut and paste my IP address here. Let's see, I guess it's got it. I don't know. Come on. Okay, and I'm going to cut and paste that into the browser. All right, I guess it's not going to let me cut and paste. 54.187. Okay, it's already there. Okay, so look, here's what's inside index.html. It says, congratulations, you are running Bitnami LAMP 7.47 in the cloud. Then it gives you links to the documentation or support and so on. So if we go into our command prompt, what we can do is we can just convince ourselves that that's what's being shown to us. We can go nano space index.html, and you'll see the HTML code or text that makes up the page that we just saw. So see here how it says, you are now running, right? So it says you are now running, and then it says strong, which means it wants to be bold, Bitnami LAMP in the cloud, right? So we'll do a quick little edit here, and I'll say, isn't that fantastic, right? And then we'll do Control X, and it'll say save, and we'll say yes, Y for yes. And it's going to ask, do we write out the name, file name to write index.html, and then we'll say return. Yes, we do. And it closes out. So we edited the Nano index, with Nano, we edited the index.html file, and we just tweaked a little bit of text to convince ourselves that we had control over what the server sent to us, right? So let's see if I did this right. Okay. Let's see. We are now running. $169, $198. Yep. Okay. Sometimes your web browser needs to be refreshed, right? And so that's why it looks like I don't know what I'm doing, but actually I did make the file change. And if I just change this URL slightly, it will refresh, and you'll see the text that I made. So I guess fair warning that that can come into play when you're testing your web browser and loading a URL that's been changed. Okay, so the point of this exercise is to show you that a web server is going to deliver the text that you request of it. In this case, it's just a very simple HTML page, which we edited using a practically 1980s era text editor. That's the Nano program that we ran. There are many, many more ways to edit text and HTML files on a web server, and we can get to those depending on how much interest there is in writing HTML and PHP code. I think that it would be a useful experience to learn HTML and PHP to a minimal level so that you could write a basic website and do a blog and things like that, but we'll get some more feedback about that. So to wrap this little module up, we did do a very basic but illustrative example of web application serving. You can think of it, we talked about Hello World, you can think of it as your experience publishing to the internet, your first experience, right? Maybe you have done some website development in the past in some other course, but I'm guessing most of you haven't. So if this is your first time making a web server and seeing the result of your work on the screen, it's kind of a win. Now, I guess you've been working for maybe 3 hours at this point through this little series of videos, and when you first started, probably didn't even know how the data really got around from point A to point B on the internet. But now, just 3 hours later, you've signed up for a cloud account, you launched a web server to the cloud by virtualization, you've been able to connect to the server securely through an encrypted SSH connection, and now you've been able to go into your application server and you've been able to modify the contents of that server so that you're able to display the text that you wanted to display. Now, we can certainly embellish around this with more advanced HTML and JavaScript and PHP. We can't do all that in the first day, but for those of you that are interested in, you have a lot of resources at your disposal to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. So we're going to stop here and we'll move on to the next point.